All right, so today we're going to be looking at Vincenzo Carnevale.
Okay.
And from what I've seen so far, he's doing some really interesting work with computational physics.
Hmm.
But it's not like the typical physics research that comes to mind. We're
Right.
talking proteins and genes,
Ah.
maybe even like a glimpse into how the brain works.
You really picked an interesting one this time.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's amazing how much computational methods are like changing the game in biology these days.
yeah, totally. And I've got like his lab website pulled up right here,
Okay.
his Temple University faculty page,
Uh-huh.
and his Google Scholar profile. So it
Nice.
looks like he's an associate professor at Temple.
Okay.
And just the amount of work that he's done is incredible.
Yeah.
Like, the scope is huge. So,
Well, let's dive in.
yeah, let's dive in and see what we can find.
I'm curious to see what connections we can make between all of his different projects.
Yeah, for sure. So, first off, his lab focuses on theoretical and computational physics,
Okay.
but more specifically at the interface with biology, chemistry, and computer science.
Wow, that's quite the combination.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It sounds like he's really not afraid to kind of like blur the lines between traditional scientific disciplines.
Yeah,
And that's often where the most exciting breakthroughs happen, when you're working between those lines.
for sure. And looking at his Google Scholar profile, he's definitely making an impact.
Oh, yeah.
Almost 4,500 citations.
Wow.
That's a lot of researchers building on his work.
Yeah, that's a sure sign of influence for sure.
Yeah, so other scientists are finding his research really valuable and relevant to their own work.
Clearly.
Okay, so we know that he's kind of a big deal, but what's he actually researching?
Yeah, good question.
So the Carnevale Lab website mentions that they use statistical physics and machine learning to understand how proteins work.
Okay.
And they're really focused on the connection between a protein sequence, its three-dimensional structure, and its function.
Oh, that's a really fundamental question in biology. It's like cracking the code of life.
Totally.
If we can understand how the order of amino acids determine a protein's shape and then what it does,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it opens up a world of possibility.
Absolutely. And they're not just looking at individual proteins either.
Oh, really?
They're looking at how those relationships lead to more complex behaviors like epistasis.
Now, epistasis is fascinating. It's like the idea that changes in one amino acid can actually influence the function of others in a protein.
Okay.
So imagine trying to understand a complex machine where tweaking one tiny part can have ripple effects throughout the whole system.
Wow, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It makes it much easier to visualize
Yeah,
what's going on at that molecular level.
right.
So how could understanding epistasis be applied to real-world problems then?
Well, imagine being able to design drugs that target specific amino acid interactions.
Okay.
So you could potentially disrupt disease pathways with incredible precision, and that could lead to more effective treatments with fewer side effects.
That's incredible. So it's not just about understanding how proteins work.
Right.
It's about using that knowledge to develop therapies that could potentially change lives.
Exactly. And it's not just about drugs either.
Oh, okay.
Understanding epistasis could also revolutionize fields like synthetic biology,
Okay.
where researchers are trying to engineer biological systems with specific functions.
That makes sense. I'm starting to see how this research that seems kind of abstract could have a real impact.
Yeah.
Now, the lab website also mentions something called biomolecule self-organization and pattern formation.
Mm-hmm.
Can you break that down for me a little bit?
Sure. So think about how individual molecules like proteins interact and arrange themselves to form larger functional structures.
Okay.
It's kind of like a microscopic construction crew assembling a building.
Wow, yeah.
This process is really crucial for understanding how cells are organized and how they carry out their specific tasks.
Right, so it's kind of like understanding the blueprints of life.
Exactly.
But how do you even begin to study something that's so complex?
Well, that's where computational tools come in.
Okay.
They allow us to simulate these interactions
Right.
and visualize how molecules behave in a way that would be impossible with traditional lab techniques.
So it's like having a virtual microscope that can zoom in on the tiniest details of life.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Now, here's something that really caught my eye. They're looking into the molecular underpinnings of electrical signaling in excitable cells. Is this where the brain connection comes in?
Absolutely. The brain relies on electrical signals for communication between neurons.
Okay.
So if we can understand how those signals work at a molecular level,
Uh-huh.
it could have huge implications for neuroscience.
Wow.
Imagine being able to treat conditions like epilepsy or Alzheimer's disease by targeting the specific molecules involved in neural communication.
That would be incredible. Okay, so we've got proteins, genes, even the brain. It seems like the Carnevale lab is tackling some really big questions.
Yeah, they are.
What tools are they using to do all of this?
Well, they're using a pretty diverse range of computational techniques.
Okay.
Everything from statistical field theories and molecular dynamics simulations to statistical inference of generative models and even deep learning.
Wow, it sounds like they're pulling out all the stops using cutting-edge computational methods to tackle these challenging biological problems.
Yeah, it's really impressive.
What's really fascinating to me is that they're bringing together approaches from physics, biology, and computer science.
Right, and that's key because these problems are so complex that you really need multiple perspectives to make real progress.
Yeah,
It's like trying to solve a puzzle. You need all the pieces to see the full picture.
I like that analogy. So we've established that Vincenzo Carnevale is a brilliant scientist with a really diverse toolkit tackling some truly fundamental questions in biology.
Yeah, for sure.
But what's the current state of things at the Carnevale lab? What are they working on right now?
Well, their website mentions that they have like a team of around 10 researchers.
Hmm.
So that's a lot of brain power, focused on these questions.
Yeah, and they've got funding from the NIH and the NSF.
Oh, wow.
So they're really getting support from some major players, and their current projects are focused on some pretty specific areas like
Okay.
molecular mechanisms of ion channel activation,
Right.
particularly in two channels called TRPV1 and TRPV6.
Uh-huh.
Can you tell me a little about those?
Yeah, so those are really fascinating channels.
Okay.
They're involved in sensing all sorts of stimuli like temperature and pain. Think about how you feel like a hot stove.
Yeah.
That's TRPV1 in action.
Okay, so their research could have implications for pain management then.
Absolutely. If they can figure out how these channels work at a molecular level,
Yeah.
it could lead to new ways to treat chronic pain. Imagine being able to target those specific channels
Okay.
to block pain signals without having to rely on like addictive opioids.
Wow, that would be a game changer for so many people.
Yeah.
It's really amazing how this research connects to something that's so tangible and important.
Right? It shows how fundamental research, even if it seems abstract at first, can eventually lead to real-world applications that can make a difference in people's lives.
Yeah, it's like that saying, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
I like that.
But speaking of journeys, let's talk about some of their past projects.
Okay.
So they worked on designing biosensors for cancer detection using something called Xenon 129 NMR.
Uh-huh.
Can you explain what that is like in simple terms?
Yeah, so imagine like a super sensitive molecular detective that can sniff out cancer cells hiding in the body.
Okay.
That's essentially what they were developing using Xenon 129 nuclear magnetic resonance.
Okay, but how does that actually work?
It involves using the magnetic properties of xenon atoms to track down specific molecules.
Okay,
So they design these tiny biosensors that bind to cancer cells.
got it.
And those sensors can then be detected using Xenon 129 NMR,
Uh-huh.
allowing doctors to see exactly where those cancer cells are located,
Wow.
all without invasive biopsies.
So it's like having a molecular GPS
Yeah,
that can pinpoint cancer cells with crazy accuracy?
exactly.
That's an amazing application of computational biology.
It really highlights how this field is kind of blurring the lines between physics, chemistry, and medicine,
Yes.
leading to some really innovative diagnostic tools.
Now, another past project focused on understanding how ion channels respond under normal physiological conditions.
Right.
Why is that important?
Well, ion channels are essential for a ton of processes in the body.
Okay.
Everything from nerve impulses to muscle contractions.
Uh-huh.
So if we can understand how they work when everything is running smoothly,
Right.
we can better understand what goes wrong when they malfunction in disease states.
So it's like having a baseline to compare things to.
Yeah,
You need to understand the normal before you can figure out the abnormal.
exactly. It's like trying to fix a car engine without knowing how it's supposed to run in the first place.
Right? So they're building like a foundational understanding of how these tiny molecular machines operate in the context of a living cell.
Yeah, it's really quite amazing.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. But science is rarely a solo endeavor, so who is Vincenzo Carnevale collaborating with?
Well, his Google Scholar profile shows collaborations with researchers from all over the place,
Okay.
including Michael L. Klein from Temple University and Lucy Delamotte from KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden.
Oh, wow. So it sounds like he's really built quite a network,
Yeah.
bringing together expertise from a lot of different fields to tackle these complex problems.
Right, and that's really the beauty of science these days. The biggest challenges often require collaboration and sharing ideas across disciplines.
It's like a global brain trust,
I like that.
working together to push the boundaries of knowledge. So having looked at all this research, what stands out to you? What are your initial impressions?
What strikes me most is the sheer potential of computational biology to just revolutionize our understanding of life. It's not just about collecting data anymore. It's about using that data to build models, make predictions, and ultimately design solutions to real-world problems.
Yeah, it's like we're shifting from observation to prediction and design.
Exactly.
We're not just passively watching life unfold.
Uh-huh.
We're starting to understand the rules of the game and even learn how to change them.
Precisely. And that's where things get really exciting and maybe a little bit daunting, too.
Yeah, I hear you. It's like we're on the verge of unlocking some incredible secrets, but with that knowledge comes responsibility.
Right. It makes you wonder about the ethical implications. If we can predict how proteins behave with such accuracy,
Yeah.
what are the implications for things like personalized medicine or genetic engineering?
It's a question we definitely need to be thinking about.
For sure.
As we gain more power to manipulate biological systems, we really need to be mindful of the potential consequences.
Absolutely. It's a conversation that needs to involve scientists, ethicists, policymakers, and the public at large.
All right, so we've delved into the world of Vincenzo
I
Carnevale,
have.
explored his research, his lab, his collaborations, and even touched on some of the broader ethical considerations.
Yeah.
What's your biggest takeaway so far?
For me, it's the way computational biology is bridging the gap between the theoretical and the practical.
Okay.
We're not just talking about like abstract concepts anymore.
Right.
We're seeing how those concepts can be translated into real-world applications that have the potential to improve human health and well-being.
I agree. And it's fascinating to see how Carnevale's work connects to so many different areas.
Yeah.
From pain management to cancer detection to understanding how the brain works.
It really does.
It really shows just the interconnectedness of everything. It really does highlight how science is becoming so interdisciplinary these days.
Yeah.
You can't just stay in your own lane anymore.
Right.
You have to be willing to collaborate and learn from other fields.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that makes this kind of research so exciting.
Uh-huh.
You never know where it might lead or what connections you might find.
Right. Speaking of connections, one thing that struck me is that Vincenzo Carnevale, he's not just a researcher.
Right.
He's also an associate professor.
Yeah.
So what kind of impact do you think that mentorship role has on the future of science?
Oh, that's huge. I mean, it's one thing to make discoveries yourself.
Yeah.
But it's a whole other level to inspire and train the next generation of scientists.
It's like planting seeds that will grow into a forest of knowledge.
Exactly. His students, they're not just learning techniques.
Mhm.
They're learning how to think critically, how to ask the right questions,
Right.
how to push the boundaries of what's possible.
So who knows what amazing discoveries they'll go on to make.
Exactly.
It's inspiring to think about just the ripple effect of his work, not just through his own research, but through the students that he's mentoring.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
You have.
If you had to sum up Vincenzo Carnevale's work in just a few words, what would you say?
I would say he's using computational tools to unlock the secrets of life.
I love that it's as simple and as profound as that.
Yeah.
And for our listener out there who's been with us on this deep dive,
Yeah.
what's the one thing you want them to take away from this episode?
I'd say pay attention to the intersections.
Okay.
That's where the real innovation is happening. Don't be afraid to explore different fields, ask unexpected questions,
Yeah.
and make connections that others might miss.
That's great advice. It's a good reminder that knowledge isn't confined to neat little boxes.
Right.
It's a vast and interconnected web just waiting to be explored.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe you, the listener, will be the one to make the next big discovery.
Ooh, I like that we'll leave you with that thought-provoking idea.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Vincenzo Carnevale.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.